This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
Joiners into the ball game now. 3 wide receiver set. 4-man rush. Rattler's in some trouble. Steps up, runs. He's diving forward, reaches the ball out.
Touchdown.
Touchdown,
They give it.
Carolina.
Yeah, they give it.
Touchdown, Spencer Rattler. From 6 yards out, he took it on his own shoulders and reached out at the last minute.
Welcome back into the Extra Point. It's Reaction Monday here on the game. Tyler Head along with you. Wes Mitchell now joining me in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. That, of course, was the voice of Todd Ellis on the call on Saturday night. Spencer Rattler scrambling for the touchdown in the first quarter to give the Gamecocks the 10-7 lead. That was the only lead they would hold for the night, as South Carolina would soon give up that lead to Tennessee, and the Volunteers would cruise to the 41-20 victory. Wes, rough night out there in Knoxville.
Yeah, fitting, Rattler did score on that play, but having to kind of run for his life, I guess, if you will. And, I thought in a lot of ways this game came down to matchups, and as they often do. And for South Carolina, unfortunately, the things we've been talking about for 5 weeks now, I thought were just kind of taken advantage of by Tennessee. And I think there was some progress we saw last week in these same areas, but I think when you faced a better team this week in Tennessee and playing them on the road, I think the crowd was a factor in this game too. But there were probably, I would say, 3 plays or sequences that I thought were just kind of disastrous as far as putting South Carolina in a position to win the game, that went against them. But even those 3 plays or sequences I'm talking about, one, of course, being the pick 6, the other 2 being the 4th down stops, those are more symptoms to the issues and kind of the fact they did not convert those situations go back to those same problems. You would say inability to protect your quarterback, particularly on the edge, offensive tackle, inability to consistently run the football in order to keep your opponent kind of off balance. I thought there were some flashes in the running game, but it was not consistent enough. And then in the second half, South Carolina was kind of trying to just chase the game, basically chase the points. So that took that out a little bit. And I thought maybe a little bit of a new issue. It did not feel like there was a ton of separation with the wide receivers and Tennessee's defenders. We can dive into all those things at some point, but that was kind of the overhead view of what I saw on Saturday.
Well, and that clip there, obviously, again, giving South Carolina its lone lead of the night. And this game did not get out of hand until very late in the going when Tennessee ended up getting up 34-17. That was a 3-score lead, and then the route was kind of on from there. But South Carolina was just like that one play away from really getting back into it, but you just never felt like they had the ability outside of Mari Anderson's touchdown run in third quarter. They just didn't have the ability to pull out that big play to really make you think, wow, they might still have a shot in this one. It felt like Tennessee dominated the entire game.
Yeah, it did, and it was kind of once, that pick 6 just kind of flipped the entire momentum of the game, and it kind of felt like Tennessee had taken the momentum, but it's one of those things where in the moment you kind of can feel it starting to snowball a little bit. And I know if you're South Carolina, you're saying, look, we're down by 7. We know how fast Tennessee can score, and you're at their place. Crowd is going nuts. The last thing you want is to punt the ball back to them, for them to put in a late score on you, and then score to start the second half as well, because Tennessee did get the ball to start the second half. So I get it. You're trying to do everything you can to stay on the field. Well, in doing that, you also got, I would say, super aggressive on the 3rd and 22. And looking back, I mean, just the risk reward there, I don't think kind of the decision there, I don't like, because the risk reward there did not give you enough reward to make you want to take that risk, in my opinion. Because if that ball is completed,
Sure.
and I'm sure that's not the first option on that route, but or on that play, even if that ball is completed, it's not a first down.
No.
So, I completely get, in the moment you're saying we have to stay on the field here, but with the pass protection issues anyway, particularly in situations when Tennessee was able to kind of just pin their ears back,
Right.
which obviously 3rd and long is another one of those situations. You kind of, as much as you hate to do it, you almost have to live to fight another down there and just try and make Tennessee drive the field at the last second there. But I get it in the moment, but certainly looking back, you probably just run the draw or quick screen and punt the ball back.
And outside of the decision itself, that was probably the first time this entire season where you looked at a play that Spencer Rattler made and said, that kind of looks like the Spencer Rattler from the first 10 games last year. Now, he was being pressured, certainly, steps up and just a very bad throw, completely throws it over the top of Micah Blake's head, right into the arms of the defender, who basically walks in the end zone at that point. Like, that's one of the plays that we just haven't, one of the mistakes that we haven't seen Spencer Rattler really make it all this season.
Yeah, and I think it was one of those things, just trying to do too much in the moment. And, you're trying to make a play. The game is right there. It's a 7-point game. And, kind of a forgotten sequence. The fact that South Carolina, ensuing kickoff, ends up actually getting the ball at the 50.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of, I'm saying to myself, all right, as bad as that scenario was for them, pick six towards the end of the half, in a half where you've hung in there. You've stayed in the game at least. You've given yourself a fighting chance, which was very different from the first half last time South Carolina was in Knoxville.
Yep.
And then to get such great field position, when really, if you look a lot of times in this game, field position was a huge issue for South Carolina. Again, they finally did have great field position in this situation, not to be able to just bounce right back and tack something on, even a field goal
right
there. I thought was massive. The other just, I thought, kick to the gut is you pull off another beautiful fake punt. Gutsy call, gutsy execution, all the things. They obviously saw something they liked. Even they said dating back to last year, they had this in the book based on something they saw on Tennessee's punt return team. You hit it backed up in your own territory. There's a certain amount of confidence you have to have in your guys to call that long of a pass from your punter in that situation and just be like, he's going to execute this. And they execute it perfectly. It seemed to shift momentum, but then to not convert the 4th down right after that, just in the moment, you're kind of saying, man, that is a huge sequence. That maybe comes back to bite you, and I think it did. If you go down and score after that, maybe the entire thing shifts. Maybe you get the crowd off your back just a little bit. I know they had been drinking Tennessee whiskey all evening, all afternoon, I think. But
they're very charged up. I got Colin Taylor's insight from being there on Saturday, and he said that's probably the most hostile crowd he's ever seen. They were loud the entire game. They were certainly, towards the end of the game, making some, chants at Rattler and Beamer that we certainly couldn't play for you on the radio, but they were definitely into it. They were definitely charged up, and honestly, I was very surprised that Tennessee didn't try and run the score up there at the end with tacking on an extra touchdown. This felt like a very personal game considering what happened last year, and just South Carolina got ran over. That's all you can say.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to those matchups, and we knew Tennessee was a good pass rush team coming in. That was on full display, I think, on Saturday, and I think crowd noise was a factor in South Carolina's offensive line play as well. I give the Tennessee fans credit; they brought the juice and they brought the momentum, and I think I mean, looking back, probably should not have picked South Carolina like this. A lot went Tennessee's way in this game. Like they looked like the better team.
They did,
and they were at home. And when you have those things go against you, you look back at what South Carolina did on 3rd or 4th down last year, being able to stay on the field, convert some of those things, and then look at it Saturday night. It's kind of it was going to be hard to win if you did not convert those opportunities.
Absolutely. We'll continue to react to this all day long here, as it is a Reaction Monday, as we talk about Carolina falling to Tennessee 41-20 up in Neyland Stadium on Saturday. The Extra Point rolls along. He's Wes Mitchell. I'm Tyler Head.
Every Monday, Rich Eisen and Chris Brockman react to what's happening in the world of football on Overreaction Monday.
The AFC North. Not all 4 teams going to make the playoffs.
More likely than not.
More likely than not, right?
Okay.
And I know they've been the king of this jungle for the last few seasons. The Cincinnati Bengals, Rich, are going to miss the playoffs this year.
This is an overreaction. Bengals are not only making the playoffs, they're winning this division. Again, for a 3rd straight year.
Overreaction Monday, the podcast, wherever you listen.
Here on The Game.
Yeah, really disappointing. And it wasn't because they were bringing a lot of pressure. They were just beating us up front. And, we tried to help our offensive line with, some max protection and keeping the running backs in and keeping the tight end in to chip and things like that. And we got beat way too many times. And even though it turns into a passing game, no excuse for that. Got 2 true freshmen out there, but I saw our older guys getting, beat too many times as well, which is disappointing.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point here on a Reaction Monday. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, along with you. Chris Clark will join us in the 11 o'clock hour for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Coach Beamer there talking about the pressure that Tennessee was putting on South Carolina in that game on Saturday night. And Tennessee came into this game as one of the most successful teams in the entire country in terms of sacks, coming in with 16. And again, they just kind of wreaked havoc on the South Carolina offensive line, ending the game with 6 more sacks there and just really bullying South Carolina, especially on the edges there. When you look at Tree Babalade and Tyshawn Wanamaker, I brought up this example earlier, they just seemed like they were on roller skates the entire night. The Pro Football Focus grades are in the 30s. The only person that didn't allow more than one pressure was Vershawn Lee. Like, the entire offensive line just got taken to the woodshed on Saturday night.
Yeah, and I think some of that is, hey, Tennessee, give them credit. I thought they played great. They really just attacked the edge, the outside rush, and it just felt like South Carolina just kind of couldn't get to their landmark almost. Like, the quickness just gave them fits. And, I think game situation, crowd, all that played into that. But ultimately, it was just kind of the same issues we've talked about being exposed again. And, I think this was as much as we've seen Tree Babalade kind of hold up against Georgia and hold up last week against Mississippi State. I feel like this was just his first kind of welcome to the SEC type moment, type game. He'll bounce back. He'll play better. He'll learn from it, and I got no doubts about that guy moving forward. But certainly, it was not a memorable game for him. It was not a memorable game for Tyshawn Wanamaker on the other side. Right tackle continues to be something they have to solve. Bieber mentioned possibly giving Sidney Fugar another look in there. And
but I feel he was the worst one in the North Carolina game. So
yeah, but also that's his first ever FBS start. So
that's true.
I think you gotta if guys aren't performing, even if a guy didn't perform in a previous opportunity, you keep rolling them in there and trying to let them come along, trying to let them get better. I think too often we're trying, and Fugar has been picked on more than anybody, I feel like, on the offensive line by the fan base. These are not, everything's not static. Like, guys can get better, guys can improve, and they can't have what happened this past Saturday happen again. So I think you got to keep rolling people in there. If they can get Ja'Kai Moore back healthy, maybe you give him a look at right tackle as well. It is still an issue, but you can't stop trying to solve it. Just because you've had issues there, you can't just say, hey, we're just gonna roll with it and hope for the best. Now, not every team's going to be able to expose you the way Tennessee did.
Sure.
But certainly that kind of shows you, if you do face an opponent again who has the pass rush juice that Tennessee has, if you can't clean it up, you're going to probably have the same result.
Well, I think Saturday night really kind of, if you weren't aware of it already, really set in the reality of what the health of the offensive line is. We obviously know you lost Jalen Nichols before the season. You lose Casey Henry on the first drive against North Carolina. You lose Marquis Anderson. You mentioned Jalen or Ja'Kai Moore already being banged up, didn't get to play. You just have only so many bodies that you can rotate through there. And would you like to maybe have to go back to a Sidney Fugar at right tackle? Probably not, but you really don't have that many other options there. And again, if Wanamaker's struggling, how much worse can you be, it seems like?
You got to keep rolling them in, honestly, and hope that it eventually clicks and that you can continue to make progress. I have not completed a rewatch of the game, to be honest. I've actually got it on right here on my iPad, and just right off the bat from the very beginning, it's and it's not even, hey, they brought 6 here. A lot of times it's, hey, they brought 4. Maybe there's a twist, maybe there's a stunt, but still, to me, it was Tennessee winning those one-on-one battles up front, and then to kind of tack on. It, like I said earlier, it just did not feel like there was a ton of separation by your wide receivers.
Yeah, it definitely felt like, and I asked Con for this confirmation on that, they played a lot of cover one, and they brought down the safety to be on the get pretty much every single play, which is what you do when you have that one dominant receiver. So he wasn't really able to get out in space and establish much there on Saturday night. And again, when you're missing Juice Wells on the other side, you don't have that other guy that can break open on the other side of the defense and make a difference. And that's no disrespect to Omega Blake and Luke Doty and those kind of guys, but you just don't have that second viable option necessarily, as opposed to Xavier Legette that can really make a difference there.
Yeah, I wish I had an all-22 to really be able to tell. Cole Kubelik, he always does these tweets where he gives a thought on every single team on Sunday. He had, now, I don't know to what percentage, like how many plays this was the case. He did say there were times when there were people that were open, but then, how often is it that you drop back, hey, you got somebody open on this play, but then the play gets blown up because there's somebody in your face.
Sure.
Then add in, I think pressure stacks. So if you get enough pressure on a quarterback, he's going to see pressure even when it's not there,
right,
and run himself into pressure at times. And it just, when you look at, again, how important it was last year, Carolina winning one-on-one battles at wide receiver, Juice Wells, Jalen Brooks, Josh Vann making plays for you. I thought Amarian Brown being back was going to be a key factor in this game. It really wasn't, or I think it was going to need to be a key factor, I should say.
Yeah, was a 44-yard catch and run, made a couple guys miss. That was early on in the game.
Yeah, so it needed, they were going to have to win those one-on-ones. And, unfortunately for Carolina, they didn't win the one-on-ones up front, but they didn't really consistently win the one-on-ones. And even without seeing the all-22, when Beamer says, hey, guys, we need more wide receivers to step up, we need these guys to continue to come along, to me, that's probably him saying that, all right, we were not consistently getting enough separation in the secondary, which, hey, give credit to Tennessee as well. They did what they needed to do.
Absolutely. And again, Gamecocks fall 41-20 to the Volunteers on Saturday night. We are reacting to it all day long here on a Reaction Monday. Coming up next, we'll get some of Chris's thoughts as well as we jump into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on this Reaction Monday here on The Game.
Former Navy SEAL Mike Ritlin keeps it real on the Mike Drop podcast.
He's the co-CEO of the All Secure Foundation, which assists special operations and active duty combat vets. Tom Satterley.
Nobody helped you shoot your gun. They trained you how to shoot your weapon. So we're going to train you on the things you've never been trained for, how to come home from war. Everything else that turns people away from it, we try to rebrand it.
Reduce or dismiss the kind of stigma that's associated with it.
You have to.
Mike Drop. Raw, unfiltered, intellectually sound. Wherever you listen.
It's Reaction Monday. Tell us all about it.
Jim Foley caught at the 21-yard line. Xavier Legette with back-to-back catches, and he's got the Gamecocks inside the 25.
Sponsored by Carolina Honda Powerhouse, your local Honda superstore for motorcycles, ATVs, side-by-sides, scooters, and generators. CarolinaHonda.com. Your home of the Gamecocks in the Midlands. 107.5 The Game. Also heard on the Grand Strand at 100.3 The Game. And in the PD at 100.5 The Game in Florence.
Welcome into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Here on the game on your Reaction Monday, Tyler and Wes with you in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Welcome in Chris Clark on the Love Chevrolet phone lines. Chris feeling a little under the weather today. He's going to be joining us on the phone for the next hour. I asked Wes's impressions of what he saw on Saturday night a little bit ago. Chris, what did you see take place up there in Neyland Stadium with Gamecocks falling short 21-40?
Yeah, man, I think it reminded me actually a good bit of South Carolina's first game, against UNC, neutral site in Charlotte, in that you get a couple interceptions, you steal a possession on special teams. Against UNC, of course, it was the onside kick to open the second half. In this game, it was of course, the fake punt executed beautifully by Kai Kroger and Xavier Leggett, drawn up very well by Pete Limbo, those guys. But I think both of the contests, the story of it was kind of missed opportunities, right? You think back to the UNC game, you had that stolen possession with the onside kick at and you have the ball in great field position, you come away with nothing. In this game, you come away with nothing. In that situation after you execute the fake punt, and then you just a lot of missed opportunities in general, not getting off the field on third down, defensively in crucial moments, some explosive plays which was similar to UNC, and then offensively you can't protect the quarterback with any consistency. And even though we saw some improvements in the run game, too many sacks, too many negative plays, and just a lot of self-inflicted wounds, and you weren't nearly good enough, not even in the universe you needed to be in on third down conversions and on fourth down conversions. There were several of those instances. So to me, there were some parallels between the two games in some areas that you just couldn't afford to have some of those mistakes and some of those missed opportunities.
Yeah, and to add to that, I just felt like that this was a game where the issues we've been talking about all year long kind of just reared their heads again. And it's kind of, I go into every game thinking it's a game of matchups. And I was very curious to see, all right, last week against Mississippi State, we saw some improvements in several of these areas we've been talking about. But it was, okay, how good is Mississippi State? How bad is Mississippi State? How much of the improvement is South Carolina actually improving? How much of this is just a week-to-week matchup thing? We knew Tennessee was pretty good at getting to the passer and creating that pass rush up front. We knew this would be a test. We knew that the road factor would be big in this as well, and that the crowd, I think, always affects your ability as an offensive line a little bit in terms of timing, just not being able to hear yourself. It gives the defense just a little bit that split second of a head start that maybe they don't have when the roles are reversed. So I was curious to see kind of the latest test and if South Carolina could pass it. But obviously they tried to do all types of little things to maybe give themselves a chance, quicker throws. People say, hey, throw some screens. I know they tried one misdirection running back screen that just got completely blown up. And, unfortunately for Carolina, it's just that you can look at, like, the specific plays that kind of were key, were huge. Obviously the pick six, obviously getting stopped on third and short and then fourth and short. Like Chris said, one of them coming off of the fake punt where I'm sitting there saying you have to get points here. Like, you have to find a way to score here. That just felt like a gut punch at the time. But even within those specific plays, you can look at how the underlying issues that we're talking about plagued them on all three of those sequences. So, I look at those three plays as kind of like the symptoms, but ultimately it just goes all the way back to those same sort of issues we've been talking about. Unfortunately for for most of the year.
Yeah, and I think, man, when you look at but there's been a lot of analysis of, you know, coaching decisions, and I think all that's fair. You know, like, it's fair to say, should you have gone for it on fourth down on the fake punt drive, right? When that drive stalls out. Should you have been throwing the ball back up? And I know Beamer gave an explanation to that, right? Saying, hey, we trust Spencer Rattler. We didn't want to punt it back to them. To me, that's one that kind of stands out, honestly, and we can unpack this one a little bit more. But I think, to make the kind of piggyback off your point, like, the coaching decisions and the analysis of, you know, what type of schemes are you running on offense, what's the play calling like, yes, those things are all very important, especially in, like, a low margin of error game like this where, you know, you needed some things to go your way. You needed to maximize what your team could be. But I think really it was those same issues. Yet Mario Anderson did have, you know, an explosive 75-yard run that was, given what we've seen, it was kind of a surprise, right, in this game, a pleasant surprise. We did see some good things, but a lot of the issues we saw, not being able to protect Rattler, not being able to run the ball in short yardage, giving up too many explosive plays defensively, I think those were the bigger issues, right, in the game. And, you know, when you can't do those things, when those things kind of do rear their ugly head, then the other stuff, you know, hey, what type of play calling you're utilizing, decisions to go for it or not, those kind of amplify those issues. And if you don't make the quote-unquote right decision, then it can really, really pile up and snowball on you. I think that decision down, you know, when you're backed up, I mean, the route you had called wouldn't have netted you a first down anyway. To me, it's about the same as a run. You know, I don't know. Am I wrong on that, guys? I feel like, you know, let's say you completed that ball to Omega Blake. Isn't it about the same outcome as running the football?
Yeah, you're getting, at best, maybe a 4th and 15 there, getting a little bit more out of the shadow of your own goal line, but not a whole lot.
Yeah, it's like my point earlier, Chris, was risk reward. Yeah. Let me enunciate here. The reward there is not really worth the risk. Now, that can't be the first route on that call.
Couldn't have been.
So let's, you know, I don't think they're dialing that up necessarily. I think that's just where the coverage maybe dictated it ended up going. So, you know, I don't think I think we got to factor that in as well if we're talking about the decision. I had no problem with the fourth down decisions. I'm sitting there saying go for all of those. Like, if you're not you already kind of reluctantly kicked 2 field goals in this game, even though from a philosophical standpoint you probably don't want to. Like, Beamer even said that pregame on the field talking to the crew, hey, we're not going to win this game kicking field goals. But then you're in those situations in the game. It's very reluctant. It's like you almost have to kick. You have to get points here. At one point they were down 17. So even though you're kind of, it's like taking your medicine, like, you know, you got to take it, but you're kind of holding your nose as you do it. You're like, man, you got to cut it to 2 scores here. Yep. But are you that confident you're going to hold them to no more scores? You kind of are sitting there saying you needed 7. That way, then you have that window to where if I get 7 here, I can just hold them to a field goal, and it's still a 2-score game. Early on, they kick the field goal because you want to get something. You want to get some type of answer off of that drive. And so I had no problem with the fourth down decisions. There was a 4th down. I can't place it in my head right now. There was a 4th and short-ish when Carolina was backed up in their own territory. And I even said then, because you could feel the momentum of the game sort of leaving, I was like, you can't go for it here, but I would be so tempted to just say, just go for it. Like, it just felt like a time you had to and needed to stay on the field. My biggest issue, my biggest call, the one I think you absolutely can kind of break down and say was the wrong call, was the throw on that 3rd down backed up. You know, the context does matter. Like, even sitting there, you're saying, all right, you're down 7. You don't want to give the ball back to Tennessee because they can score so fast, and they're getting the ball to start the second half. So I understand against all odds, you're saying we have to stay on the field here because you don't want this game to snowball away from you. However, by trying to avoid that, you ended up putting the game in a position to snowball away from you. So I think that's one you just look back on and you say, yeah, you kind of want that one back, to be completely honest.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, the game is, in reach. I mean, it's not like you've played great, but you're 17-10 at that point, and you can go in the half. Now, I get the flip side of feeling like, hey, Tennessee can score fast, like you said, Wes. If we punt it to D. Williams, and we saw D. Williams had an outstanding return that was called back in this game, and it kind of illustrated exactly what Pete Wimbo and Shane Beamer are very cognizant of not wanting to give them that short field. But Tennessee Joe Milton made some mistakes in this game. He threw a couple picks. So I think when you're weighing the risk reward, that's, sometimes you hear coaches say, hey, if we had to do it again, we'd make the same call. Beamer didn't say one way or another, to my knowledge, on that one, but I would have to imagine they'd probably go in the other direction. So, we talk about the middle 8 a lot. That's something that Spencer Rattler even mentioned, recently after the last game, and Tennessee won that because they were able to, with less than a minute on the clock in the first half, they're able to score a touchdown on a pick six. We all know statistically, if you give up a pick six in a game, if you have a pick six, it's hard to win the game. I mean, you can think about the Clemson game last year that were able to overcome that. It's a weird game. A lot of crazy stuff happened, but it's hard, right, to give up a pick six, and especially when you give up one right before the half. In that situation, to go down 2 scores, and then Tennessee, as Shane Beamer lamented, was able to go right down the field on their first drive. And so when we talk about the middle 8, South Carolina did answer with a touchdown, to pull it back within 2, but those were kind of back-breaking possessions of not even a possession by Tennessee. You're just throwing a pick six to them backed up, and then they go down and scored. So just too many things in this game that you couldn't let happen in spots.
Continue talking about the offense. Take a look at the run game and the offensive line a little bit more as today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour on a Reaction Monday presented by Firehouse Subs rolls on here on the game.
Yeah, you try to avoid that every game, but like I said, credit to them. They did a good job up front, great job in coverage. A lot of the time those sacks were just cover sacks. Nothing there. Just try to extend the play. Those are good players up front. They made good plays. We just got to clean up,
Welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Reaction Monday. Tyler and Wes along with you in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Chris joining us today on the Love Chevrolet phone lines. That was the voice of Spencer Rattler talking to the media after the game on Saturday night about getting sacked 6 times on Saturday night, as Tennessee came in as one of the best teams as far as sacking the quarterback goes in the country. With 16, they leave with 22. And for Rattler, just again, getting pressured left and right, particularly the tackle spots, and not being able to sit back comfortably in the pocket, and in turn had his worst game of the season.
Yeah, it was again, I go back to kind of more of the same with what we saw in the UNC game, and I think we came out of the UNC game saying that, hey, look at Spencer Rattler's numbers. Look how well he took care of the football despite the fact that he was under heat, under pressure the entire night, right? They gave up 9 sacks. Most of those, I think, in the UNC game were on the offensive line. There were a few where you could kind of split hairs and say, hey, Spencer could get rid of the ball faster here, right? But generally it was more problems up front. I think this one, it was a combo. I think the pressure that Tennessee exerted, I think it affected the entire offense, right? I think it affected Spencer Rattler too. Getting rid of the ball pretty quickly. You can think back to a couple of the short down and distances, a couple of the fourth downs where, Shane Beamer pointed out the correct depth wasn't run on the route. Was that in everybody's mind, Spencer Rattler, the receivers, that, hey, we got to get this thing done quick because we are under so much heat. You saw obviously the pick six is something that, interceptions have been very uncharacteristic for Spencer Rattler this year. Missed throws have been very uncharacteristic for him. He's made great decisions. And so I think you have to tip your hat to Tennessee because, look, Dowell Loggins pointed out, he was proven right, unfortunately for South Carolina. He pointed out kind of an alarming statement, hey, this Tennessee front is as good as we have faced. And so you think about UNC and some of the improvements they've made up front. Kyman Rucker for UNC is a guy that's been picking up a lot of NFL draft buzz. Had 2.5 sacks in the South Carolina game. You think about Georgia and the litany of talent that they always have up front, the way they scheme things up. They're really, really good up front. Tennessee was, even more disruptive. James Pierce, Rex Shop. I mean, they had several guys that did an outstanding job of winning one-on-one. South Carolina, I thought a couple times they, missed some things, from a schematic standpoint with what Tennessee was running up front with some of their games. And so, and then once again, of course, as we've said, you weren't able to consistently run the ball to back some of that pressure off.
Yeah, I thought, there were a couple little flashes from the running game. It just wasn't consistent enough. And, I think with this team right now, just where they are when they face a really good pass rush team like Tennessee has, it's going to be a struggle, but then the volume has turned up to 11 on that when they're in kind of those situational spots in a game, whether that's backed up at your own goal line, whether that's 3rd and long, or whether that's you're down by 2 or 3 scores and the game's getting later and later. When you start getting those situations where your opponent they kind of know like they got to throw here, like they're in a position where we can pin our ears back. It makes it just that much more difficult. Now every team is going to struggle to protect a little bit more in those scenarios, but South Carolina certainly already having that as a problem area. It just the problems are just tacked on there even more, I think. And, for them, I think the difference between this game and the North Carolina game was I felt like you had some open receivers all game long against UNC. So or you won 50-50 balls down the field in the case of Leggett. In this game, there was pressure, and there really wasn't even time to get the ball down the field very often. And then when they did, have time, it just felt like there just weren't consistently open guys in this game. And then I thought that did affect Rattler. Like, you look at some throws he's made all year long that just were a little bit, we're talking inches off, but, even one of the short throws, the 4th down to Leggett, if the ball sort of puts him in stride just a little bit more, is a guy able to turn up the field and kind of create a more positive game there with just a little bit better throw. So, I thought there were just some things where this pressure just adds on to you. It stacks you. Of course, there's a physical aspect of just getting hit over and over as well. Tennessee did exactly what you want to do as an SEC defense in this game, I feel like. And when you do those things, when you stop the run for the most part, when you hit the opposing quarterback, you're going to win most games, no matter how good the guy is on the other side.
Yeah, we talk all the time, guys. Talked about it before the season. We've talked about it since the season has gone on. There's so many teams that appear to be pretty doggone close to each other, in this conference. And as the season has progressed, some are, showing that they're better than others for sure, right? Like, Kentucky I was pretty high on Kentucky coming into this season. They may be even better than we thought. Florida, I was not very high on, but it may be even a little bit worse than we thought. Missouri is playing good football, but they have a lot left to play. They're undefeated. And so I think any team, you can have an outcome like South Carolina had if you make the mistakes that they did and you do it on the road. Your warts can be exposed very, very fast, right? And if you do, if Tennessee would have, had some other plays go the other way, South Carolina could have won, this football game. And so I still think, look, going in, did I leave the game saying, gosh, Tennessee is so much better of a football team than South Carolina? Sounds weird to say they won by 3 touchdowns, right? But I think they're just markedly better in a few different areas, right? In areas that were absolutely critical. And I think they were better than, I agree with you, Wes, UNC. I mean, they covered a lot better. Spencer Rattler, in that clip we heard coming in, noted that a lot of the sacks were coverage sacks, right? You had some where he was under pressure immediately. You had some where he couldn't really find anybody. And then that just caused a litany of issues for South Carolina. So Tennessee, ran the football better. They ran it. They were much better on third downs. They were much better up front, creating pressure. They were just a lot better in those areas. And I still think, it's just kind of hard to get a handle on what the South Carolina team could be, right? Because we all thought, hey, after the Mississippi State game, could some of these issues, could they be getting better, right? There's still concerns, but could they be getting better? I felt like it was kind of a step backward, a step in the wrong direction on Saturday night. But I think you credit Tennessee for a lot of that as well.
Well, and Chris, and I brought this up to Wes a little bit earlier. We obviously know there's a lot of injuries going on the offensive line, most recently the one Ja'Kai Moore is dealing with. But when you talk about how rough of a night they had, looking ahead to the next 7 games, you're going to be going up against plenty more teams that generate a good pass rush. Like, how much better can this offensive line really get as the season goes along, as we're almost to the halfway point now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge concern, I think. When you're out 7 guys, which affects your practice, but, all 7 of those are not guys who would play for you, but some of them are. I mean, Casey Henry was the starter going into game 1, and that was despite not being very experienced. I think that credit him, right? But that shows kind of where South Carolina is at that position. So you don't have him. You don't have Ja'Kai Moore. And really, from a personnel standpoint, Shane Beamer talked about getting Sidney Fugar back involved, but they just haven't found any real solutions there. Marky Anderson, of course, not available. So getting better is a necessity, right? But I think some of these issues we've seen enough to know that they're going to be dealing with them in some form or fashion all year. And so it's just about what can you do to improve it as much as you can and not have it show through as much as it did on Saturday night.
Yeah, and I think it's going to consistently be an issue, but also I didn't know if that was coach speak originally from Dow Loggins about this Tennessee front, but I do think this probably is one of the better fronts you're going to face. So, they just have to keep kind of chopping away. I don't think we can expect them to be good, like a great team up front. Like, that's probably off the table. I do think you've seen enough little kind of improvements from the running game that maybe that's kind of where you find your improvement, is trying to avoid more of these 3rd and long situations.
And we'll certainly continue to dive into that. Take a look at the defense as well, as today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on Reaction Monday, rolls on here on the game.
We did what we needed to do. Came in at halftime. I think they had like 80 yards rushing, and other than hitting that one deep ball where the kid made a hell of a catch on our sideline, they really hadn't done much in the passing game. And, so I thought they gave us an opportunity in the second half. They got some stops. And then, disappointing thing is we cut it to a 2-score game with about 9 minutes left and need to go out there and be able to get a stop. And unfortunately, we gave up a 75-yard touchdown drive. And it was kind of the story of the game or story of the night, or that got us on that one. We were out there, not a ton of plays. Tennessee ran 72 plays, but when you give up, 238 yards rushing, it's going to be tough to win.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on your Reaction Monday. Tyler, Wes, and Chris along with you. That was the voice of Coach Beamer after the game, talking about the defense. Mentioned Tennessee going for 238 yards on the ground. Joe Milton throwing for 239 yards, about as balanced can be on offense for the Volunteers, and this is just a game where South Carolina struggled just about everywhere defensively, and we talked about one of the keys going to the game at the end of last week was forcing Milton into uncomfortable situations, making him throw the ball downfield, and go back and watch the game last night. I charted only four throws farther than 10 yards on Saturday night. He missed on 3 of those. One of those was a completion with an athletic catch by the wide receiver, but he stayed in the pocket. He stayed comfortable for the most part outside of the one sack by Ben Martin Scott. And again, Tennessee just gassed you with the one run game again and again and again.
Well, 2 of them were picked off, right?
Yeah, 2 of them were picked off. 2 of the 4, and then 1 was a completion.
Yeah, I mean, guys, I don't know what you think, Chris, but I weirdly almost grade the defense on a curve for this game. Like, I can't sit here and honestly say, all right, you gave up 238 yards on the ground and say you did a good job of stopping the run. However, I weirdly thought the defense gave South Carolina a chance given everything they were up against in this game. I mean, you forced 2 turnovers, you forced 2 field goals, you forced 2 3-and-outs, and then a third 4-and-out, and you got the ball back into your offense's hands against the Tennessee offense that you kind of knew at home was going to give you trouble. I feel like. So to me, this didn't feel like 2 years ago when South Carolina just gets run over from the very beginning and is down. I think it was like 21-0 off the bat or 28-7, something like that. But it didn't feel the same to me. I know right now, kind of throwing shade on the defense is the big thing right now, and there's a lot of people upset about the defense. 7 of those points in the 41 were obviously not on the defense either. So Chris, I don't think it was a great defensive performance, but I also have seen far worse. I feel like I feel like they at least gave this team a chance to go win the game.
Yeah, I think inconsistency is just the word that comes to mind, right? Because there were some drives and some things that the defense did that did give them a chance and were impressive, but they also had their moments where, they had struggles, right? And there's one that Shane Beamer pointed out to me that I wanted to discuss with y'all because we talked about it going into the game, and that was too many, slants. Too many slants that Tennessee was able to complete. I thought there were times where their backs and their perimeter guys were able to get too many yards when South Carolina looked to have them hemmed in and kind of locked up, and Tennessee was able to just get extra yardage. There were too many, I thought, easy access throws. Tyler, you're right. I mean, Milton didn't throw the ball down the field a ton, and one of them was an incredible catch. 2 of them were picked, right? I mean, that's kind of exactly, if you were South Carolina, that's exactly what you would have wanted. You wanted Joe Milton throwing the football down the field and banking on him making some mistakes, which they did. And, one of those was great coverage by Jalen Kilgore. One of them was a play where South Carolina schematically, I think, got Tennessee and Joe Milton because they confused him pre-snap and then played a different coverage that they haven't showed a lot. That's exactly what you want, right? But some of the other things that you knew that Tennessee was going to lean on, the run, easy access, quick throws to the perimeter, slants, those are the areas that you struggled in. And so it's kind of it's an area where you credit them for some of the things they did, but you also have to recognize that there were some critical things that they did not do in the game well enough. And I think one of the storylines we talked about going in was, the nickel position, the slot corner being matched up, against Tennessee's slot receivers, is going to be more difficult, right? Because we discussed probably ad nauseum how you had Cam Smith play 80 snaps last year as your slot corner. You don't have that luxury. You don't have that option this year. You've got a secondary who, they haven't found any solutions at nickel, really. Consistent solutions. And you don't have a couple guys that you can move over there from, say, a corner position to go play nickel. And I thought that showed through in this game. I think from a personnel standpoint, that was something you had last year that you did not have this year. And this was a game in which that was a question. And Tennessee, I think got the better of them in a couple regards, and that was one of them.
Yeah, I do think South Carolina making a move, though, to put Eamon Worry at nickelback, which it appears that it looked to me like he was playing nickel for pretty much the whole game. And, we had speculated previously, would they make that move at some point? Has he been working at nickel or is he just working at the 2 safety spots? I think that's probably your best answer moving forward. You saw what DQ Smith can do when he can drop back and just put his eyes in coverage, dropping into zone on the one interception on 3rd and long. I thought DQ had some key tackles as well. Some of this I just credit to Tennessee and their scheme. Honestly, a couple of there was a 3rd and 2 early on where Tennessee completes a slant pass for a first down. South Carolina it's taking away that sort of distance everybody complains about. They're in man coverage. They're in bump and run, really. Like, he's up on the guy, and he just gets inside, completes the pass, and it's a first down. Like, I think their splits that they run on offense just I think give you fits. And unless you just have true lockdown guys, like NFL quality players, it's tough to defend, I think. And even last year, you go back and look at that game, what they were able to do defensively was heavily complemented by the fact that you scored 63 points on offense. And you were able to make Tennessee chase you all game. You just said, look, of course we can be aggressive and play man coverage, and you still gave up 30-something points. So some of that, I think, was a little bit more about the game flow. And this year's game was more of just a traditional game where Tennessee has the lead. They can kind of pick what they want to do, and they just kind of did what they do best, I feel like.
Yeah, we always talk about, complementary football, right? Well, South Carolina did that in the game last year, and the offense gave them, as it turned out, way more than they needed even. When you score 63 points, I mean, it's easy. Nobody remembers some of the offensive plays that Tennessee had in that game that were just – and last year's Tennessee offense was, I think, markedly better even than this year's. I mean, the scheme is still very difficult. They still have really good players. But last year, I mean, think about Tennessee. I think when they answered South Carolina's first score, it took 2 plays. Just a long quarterback run, a long rushing touchdown. You had a couple plays where guys were just running wide open, right? You didn't have that as much this year. I think Tennessee did have to earn what they got a little bit more, which is, a positive, but the negative is exactly what we were talking about earlier, that you still situationally gave up too many plays, too many rushing yards. You had some plays that didn't go your way in the passing game, including the squirrel right. Still don't know how he caught that ball. That was an amazing play by him, that just kind of one of those 50-50 plays that didn't go your way. But the biggest thing is exactly what you said, Wes. From a complimentary football standpoint, you didn't get anywhere close to what you got from the offense last season. And I think that does affect your defense. One other thing real quick on Eamon Worry, Wes, you pointed out staff deciding to move him to nickel. PFF had him at 69 total snaps in the game. 62 of those classified as slot corner and 5 as a box player, which we'd have to go back and see exactly how he's lined up. But, basically almost every single snap he played at the nickel position, the slot corner position on Saturday.
Continue to react to this and look ahead to what's next for South Carolina as the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs rolls on, and your reaction Monday here on the game.
Yeah, we got to get healthy for one. We got to get our young guys to continue to come on and get better. Just told the team in the locker room we're not even halfway through the season. I mean, we're not even through October yet, and we're not at the halfway point of the season. But the off week's coming at a good time. We got to get back to work. We got to get better. We got to get healthy, because right now we're a 2-3 football team, and that starts with me as the head coach. I don't believe we are a 2-3 football team. I think we're better than that, but we got to understand that when you come on the road in the SEC, or even when you play at home in the SEC, you got to be detailed and you got to make plays when you get opportunities to, and we didn't do enough of that tonight.
Welcome back in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Reaction Monday. Tyler, Wes, and Chris along with you. That was Coach Beamer talking about now heading into the bye week for the Gamecocks, as they will wait 12 days to take on Florida next Saturday at Williams-Brice Stadium. Should be getting kickoff time for that game here in the next couple of hours. Obviously, you wanted to go into the bye week with a win, be able to ride a little bit of that momentum, feel good. Sitting at that point would have been 3-2. Now you go in 2-3. Obviously dealing with a lot of injuries and a lot of things to address over these next 12 days.
I mean, I think bye week comes at a good time, honestly. Bye week's almost always come at a good time because everybody's banged up, but this team certainly. And, I think for South Carolina, you have plenty of tape now. Not that everything's just going to be a fix in a bye week, but you have plenty of tape now to sort of focus in on some things. If you're going to make any big moves, if there's anybody you're sitting there saying, hey, we've got to get this guy ready to play more. This is when you do it, I think. And it's very difficult once you start kind of rolling down the mountain of a season. I mean, the amount of time you have to get ready from one week to the next is it's incredibly small. And you're sitting there trying to get ready for, hey, this team does this team does that. Hey, they run things completely different than the last team we played. So you're trying to install things. You're trying to not install too much. Like, it is a roller coaster. So I think if you're going to try to get guys ready, this is when wholesale changes I don't expect. But they got to keep building depth, y'all. Like, I think that was the other thing with the defense. The lack of depth continues to be an issue. Certainly once TJ Sanders went down, Nick Barrett was dealing with a foot deal as well. Continuing to try to find depth and get guys ready is, I think, a huge key as South Carolina gets into what is almost the second half of the season.
Yeah, and I think there are some spots where you're still going to be limited. I mean, you look at the offensive line that we were talking about earlier. You know, you're not going to have Marquis Anderson this year. You know, Case and Henry. Hopefully for South Carolina it'll be soon, but I don't know that he's going to be ready, even after the bye week, right? So Ja'Kai Moore, we'll see how he comes along. You don't have – it's not like you say, oh, just play the freshman on the O-line. You've got two starting right now. One's injured. One is Jatavius Shivers, who by all accounts is not quite ready yet, despite having some good traits. So there are some other spots, on the other hand, where maybe you do need to – not a maybe, you do need to get some more guys ready. And some of that is young players. Some of it is older guys. JT Gear has now played in the last couple of games, but he's not played a lot of snaps against Mississippi State or against Tennessee, and he had been banged up earlier in the year. So Drew Tuizama did not even travel to Knoxville as a transfer. So that's a couple of guys with, some collegiate experience. Tuizama with a good bit of collegiate experience who have not factored in for different reasons at times. But you look at wide receiver. Do you need to get Nick Harbor more involved? Do you need to get Tyshawn Russell more involved? The answer is yes, if they're better, if they prove to be better than your other options. And at some point you might have to flip that switch and say, let's try to get these guys ready because they have the traits to where they could be. But I think this is one thing where, not seeing practice all the time, not being able to observe every nook and cranny of the program, it's easy to say, just throw this guy out there. It can't get any worse. Oftentimes that's not the case, right? Oftentimes it can get worse. And so you got to make sure they're ready. You got to walk that line and that bounce. And it's going to be a tough job, I think, at some spots to find that. But at receiver, I mean, the biggest thing is you need to have a healthy Amarian Brown back. Maybe at some point this season you get a healthy Juice Wells back. That would be the easiest way to fix it. That's the number one way to fix it. But until then, you're going to have to find some solutions at receiver. You're going to have to find some solutions at several spots, to be frank.
Yeah, I think, Chris, you've kind of reached the breaking point almost where fans are like the group of fans that are like calling for Nick Harbor to play more has gotten louder and louder and bigger and bigger. I feel like you got some people that are saying, even if they were kind of on the outside of that group, saying, well, I get it. Like more and more of those people are shooting over into the category of play the guy.
Well, and quickly on that note, it seems like, Tyshawn Russell's definitely taken more of a progressive step at the wide receiver spot. He ends up coming down with the catch on Saturday night, which makes sense. He's more of a natural wide receiver than Nick Harbor was. So he's somebody that could certainly step up. But again, he's not that same flashy name or attractive as Nick Harbor is being a 5-star. So that's who people are naturally going to gravitate towards.
Yeah, I think Tyshawn Russell has played well this year for a freshman and certainly looks to be the furthest along of the true freshman wide receivers. But Beamer used the example. First of all, consistency is the answer he gave Colin when he asked him about what do those guys need to do. That's always the answer with young players who are talented. Can you be more consistent? That's kind of the go-to answer. But, the example used is, hey, are you running the route at the exact right depth? When you have a veteran quarterback, which Spencer Rattler is, a guy that understands all the intricacies of running this scheme, he's going to expect you to be, if it's a 10-yard route, he's going to expect you to be at 10 yards, not 9.5. And it's easy to say, hey, we'll play that guy. I like him. Play that guy. He's a 5-star. But then when that guy runs the route that's a little bit off and the ball gets tipped instead of caught and it gets intercepted, then That's why coaches want you to be so detail-oriented about things, and it's tough to ask true freshmen to be as detail-oriented as a guy who's been around a little bit longer.
Yeah, and I mean, the flip side for those same fans, Wes, they're going to say, well, it's up to the coaches to get them ready. And again, there is a balance and a give and take to that. They're right in saying that. But again, when you're talking about a guy like Nick Carver, we've said this many times, not a guy who's an experienced wide receiver, even from high school.
Plenty more to break down as the week goes along. The next 2 weeks go along as we get you set for Carolina and Florida coming up next Saturday. But that'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. On your Reaction Monday halftime show with Terry coming up next right here on The Game.
We're all juggling life, a career, and trying to build a little bit of wealth. The Brown Ambition podcast with host Mandy and Tiffany the Budgetnista can help.
If I do even consider lending, I always ask myself, will this solve the problem? So I know you don't have your money for mortgage because you don't have a job. So what happens next month? Oh, I don't know. I'm going to have to think about the next month. Now, it's another thing if you're like, hey, Tiffany, I have $1,000 left to pay my car and then I'm car note free and I'll be able to pay you back, the 3 months I used to pay my car note. That solves the problem.
Brown Ambition.
Wherever you listen.